Hello to Dr. Ash Pachauri and all the participants at the second World Sustainable Development Forum. It is indeed a great pleasure for me to get this opportunity to speak on the gross national happiness and the sustainable development. But before speaking on the topic, I would like to convey and express my sincere condolences to Ash Pachauri and family for the loss of the great figure like Dr. R.K. Pachauri, whom I knew him since 1997 and who was a leading scientist for the global benefit when it comes to environment conservation, climate change and sustainable development. Now, talking of the gross national happiness, how it guides the sustainable development in Bhutan is that the gross national happiness is pursued based on four pillars: the socio-economic development, the environment conservation, cultural conservation and the good governance. From all these four pillars, it is very visible that sustainable development is important, and sustainable development can actually make us happy, which means the pursuance of the gross national happiness can be achieved through sustainable development. For this very reason, the middle path environment conservation policy in Bhutan, meaning while we need to pursue socio-economic development, it is also important to understand and balance the environment conservation from the developmental activities. Together with the balancing the development with environment conservation, it is also very important to conserve the cultural heritage that we have inherited from our forefathers, and the good governance for achieving all these other three pillars is very important. So that way, the four pillars of the gross national happiness can be directly applied to in pursuing the sustainable development, and all the 17 goals of the sustainable development is very much interwoven with our 5-year developmental plan. Bhutan is currently pursuing the 12th 5-year plan, and sustainable development goals are all very much linked to the national key result areas of the 12th 5-year plan of Bhutan. So this is how the gross national happiness actually guides the developmental policy of Bhutan, and for the global community, the gross national happiness that is being pursued in the form of sustainable development in Bhutan will become an example that we can address climate change, we can address the natural disasters, we can address the socio-economic development pursuits of the country and the global community. When we talk of the happiness, the basic thing that you need is the sustainability of the food resources, a safe human settlement, and also hygienic livelihood of the people. So until unless you have a good health, until unless you have enough essential food resources, and until unless you have a harmonious community and a safe place to live in, the sustainable development and the gross national happiness cannot be achieved. So on these very basic footings of the gross national happiness, we are pursuing sustainable development in Bhutan. To elaborate much, I do not have enough. I do not find enough space to be communicated this through internet. At the same time, I think I should not be taking too much of time of the experts on sustainable development in the Second World Sustainable Development Forum. Thank you so much for listening to me and giving your attention.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy that you are still here in this important forum. I was invited to talk to you, but I can't miss the opportunity to talk to you from where I am and where I have been for the last 6 and 7 years of my political life at the local and federal levels as well, to limit the lifestyles of a population or a country for sustainability. So, we go into what is sustainability. From my objective, clear perspective, sustainability entails a delicate balance between satisfying the needs today and those of our generation. Look, needs, not desires. You understand the needs to satisfy those by all of the planet's inhabitants without the ethnicity, social condition, economic condition, and so on. Also, of course, we need to do this today. We need to make it possible, and tomorrow too. And tomorrow, meaning the generation who is already with us, and also we have to meet those needs for the current and future generations. Having understood the above, we have this question: how to know whether lifestyles are correct or compatible with sustainability? The legal framework of a country must help to define this or to provide an answer to the question. That is why it is so important, if you are today here with us, local or federal deputies, it's important for the legal framework to always be to have it there, to have it in law, because it's not the same to have what we want to define in the forum, in a program, as having a law. That's important because, we have the law is complied with, and the law endures. I want to mention some examples. Let's say I need electricity in my daily life. Where will I get it? Whom will I buy it from? How is it generated? Where I use it, what's its environmental impact. The legal framework can establish limits in the use of polluting fuels in electricity generation. It can define economic instruments of policies as to facilitate the use of other types of energies, and that's the discussion that we must have as legislators, and that's what we're using. Myself, I have presented the possibility of the solar bonus. Electricity must be democratized. Mexican families have to be fed by solar panels. We have to have this generation, and we must have the instruments, because up to now the Federal Commission on Electricity has not given any share of the market. If you want to be different, that's it, but we have to do what's fair. So, what can we do? We can do many things, especially when we have the last special agreement of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which clearly establishes that we need actions and that we need to change lifestyles, and that there is a generation and that electricity generation creates 80 billion tons, which has a $400 billion subsidy per year. So what happens? The fight that we have is that externalities are not being monetized. That is, there is no money. So the energy of renewables has a zero or near to zero impact. Unlike fossil fuel, which even gets subsidies. But the same goes if we go to transportation. So I can go to my workplace, home, or school. How do I do it? What are my options? Which one is the least risk? Which is the cheapest? Law, regulations, technical norms. How to define the options of available transportation so we can know in relation to the different types of transportation that we have, if it's a freight, transportation, people transportation, and we can see how Riahi and the different institutions of the different countries have got their own statistics of accidents. In Mexico, we have 30,000 people being run over and over 5,000 accidents between cars and bicycles. What I do know is that it becomes the first source of CO2 generation transportation, with 171 million tons a year, which account for, just with the reference that we have for 2015. But the most important thing here is when we speak about what type of clothing I choose to wear. So, what types of clothing I decided to have to be presentable here? The water, what type of water, what type of raw materials we can certify the characteristics of a piece of clothing. For instance, regulation can define the type of processes, labeling of the industrial processes, the type of consumption, what type of chemicals were used, and so on. And it's interesting, right? According to the United Nations data, the production of some denim trousers can need 75 million liters of water. One a human being can use in 7 years, 93,000, and we have half a million of microfiber tons into the water. When we go through these examples, we see that there are many things to do, and one of the most important things that we have to do as legislators, and I have always said this, and I have had the opportunity to present really good projects like last year, the General Law of a comprehensive and sustainable management of Mexican coasts. This law is 10 years old, but it was elaborated with experts, technicians, coast universities, with organized civil society, and also with the legislators. Those are the laws that are to be born strong, because they are built between everyone to build a law. We have to be their role. The stakeholders always considering preservation, and that's the sustainable use of natural resources. I want to tell you that I am happy to say that my work has been like that, open doors for the scientific community, for technicians, for universities, for the organized civil organizations, and we have been able to present the general law of packaging and containers that we are about to present. Let's say this in a nutshell, so we can consider the norm. We have to go into these topics, and I want to tell you that in 2018 we managed to modify together, we went possible to make possible the Paris agreements, the engagement by Mexico, and to include climate change. This is progress achieved by all, because policies is building bridges, approaching to get to a good that will benefit us, and always acting at least personally, surveilling for something that will benefit people, but also for something that will help us to protect and preserve our natural resources. When we understand the relevance of natural resources, because we are the only species which is hitting the foundations of our roof, we are the only species that that does not respect. We are the only species that does not understand that the day plants will disappear, of course, we will also disappear. We are the only species that does not understand that we cannot transform that solar energy into chemical energy and then have it into our metabolism. So our best allies, our natural capital, our natural resources must take first place. And one message for the youth here, and something that I like about this forum is that it's full of the youth, the present and future engagement. We always speak about the youth as something future. No, young ones, you're already here with this generation, and you need to help us. You need to help us understand many things, because your lifestyles are different from ours, and your decisions must also be different from yours. Always inclined towards the positive. Thank you very much for the opportunity to convey my message to you. Thank you really for being here in this forum and to make it possible, and communicating to everyone. This has to become a reality, that the sustainable development that we have, that interconnection that we have, that between environmental, economic, and social, we can make this possible. We can materialize this, and that is, if we achieve this, each one, in our own field, if we manage to convey this message, I think we will be able to take one big step, and Dr. Bachari is going to be very happy wherever he is looking down on us. Thank you very much, and good afternoon.
Again, it's a great pleasure to be in Mexico. I'm a very first visit to this beautiful country. And I also feel I have to pay tribute to Professor Pachori, who I met very briefly last year. He graciously invited me and insisted that I come. So it's a very long way from Mauritius. For many of you who may not know where we are a very small island in the Indian Ocean. So coming from the Indian Ocean right up to Mexico is quite a trek. But I must say that I insisted to be here today to pay tribute to the great personality who was Dr. Pachori. So I've just listened to our friend here speak about the IPCC and what we're trying to do, identifying lifestyle and behavioral changes. Well, to be able to tackle these two topics, I'm very happy that we have amongst us so many young people, because making changes in my generation, I can tell you, is very hard. And unfortunately, the word change itself is something which many of us find difficulty in precisely changing the way we do, because we know there is no planet B. There's only one planet we have here on this planet. We all share and we all live. So change, to make it happen, there has to be a really, really big shift in the way we do things. I was very pleased to listen to Eric Solheim this morning when he mentioned that to be able to make changes, we need to create opportunities. For example, how just heard our friend mention about the textile industry, how denim takes a lot of water. How do we create opportunities so that we become less wasteful of water without having to cause change to the way we dress? So how do we recycle plastic, for example, to convert into a circular economy? So these are things that we have to really think to be able to precisely effect this change without causing too much change to our lifestyle, because I can tell you, changing lifestyle is perhaps the most difficult thing we have to do. But I think there is something much more fundamental to lifestyle change, is explaining what climate change really is to the people. Many of us talk about it, but we don't really understand what climate change is. What are the challenges it presents to our own livelihoods? So these are things that is good, as I said, we have young people here with us today because we will be able to share some of the experiences we've had and what they will have to take away in order to make the planet sustainable, in the way our livelihood sustainable. So that's all I have to just say. Maybe in the course of our discussion, we'll have more things to say. Thank you. Thank you, Nilima.
Hello, everybody. My name is John Porter, and I'm Emeritus Professor at the University of Copenhagen in Denmark and 3 other global universities. Thank you for this invitation to address you. I've been a scientific contributor to the IPCC since 1994 and led the writing of the Food Security Chapter in the IPCC Fifth Assessment Report and contributed to the recent IPCC Land Use Report and to various summaries for policymakers. The sad thing is that we in the IPCC are giving basically the same message as we did 26 years ago. We have had years of climate promises, climate excuses, and climate inaction, and now we have begun the era of climate consequences. We have 1 degree of global heating, and we have seen its impact in many parts of the world. We dare not imagine what 3 degrees will bring. But this is where we are headed, given our current emissions trajectory. I want to pay my respects to Dr. R.K. Pachauri, who died recently, and who led the IPCC from 2003 to 2015. As for scientists in the IPCC, Pachi, as he was known, was always clear that it was us who wrote the science for the policymakers and not the reverse. He was a brave human being and thus not perfect. But Pachi was and still is a big part of why we are now talking about global heating, and I thank him for his leadership. I have chosen to make this presentation carbon light by pre-recording it and sending it electronically, which has its advantages and disadvantages, but it is a lifestyle choice, and for me, and here we are to talk about lifestyles. The message in my short talk can be summed up in 7 words. Not more from less, but enough from less. The issue of climate change is no longer one of science. It has become a competition between ideologies. On the one hand is the current business as usual approach, which suggests that ever more increases in efficiency and investment can solve global heating, with a mantra that can be characterized as more from less and an increase in the efficiency of production. On the other extreme is a view that so-called free market capitalism is the problem and that emissions of greenhouse gas are unavoidable in the system. The generation of waste, of which CO2 is an example, is part of the engine that keeps the capitalist wheel rotating. The answer to this, according to this analysis, is the reduction of absolute emissions as well as relative emissions per unit product, leading to the mantra of enough from less. I just want to take a short time to explain why this mantra expresses my view. Agriculture is the sector that has done most to decouple production of food from emissions of greenhouse gases. However, it is the case that high-input agricultural systems have lower emissions per unit food production than low-input systems. So the relative emissions of high-input farming are lower, but because they produce more, their absolute emissions are higher. Therefore, I argue enough from less. Okay, let's talk about food. The first thing I want to say is that food is not the primary driver of global heating. The primary driver is our highly subsidized use of highly subsidized fossil fuels. Farmers are heroes and not villains, but some changes can be made in the food system that will help. I chair the International Steering Committee of the Global Wheat Programme, the world's most important crop, and the director of travel, especially from young people, is to restrict their meat intake. The Italian pasta manufacturers Barilla is now making legumes such as chickpea into their products. Change in food habits are occurring all the time. Food is also linked to human health. While the spectra of famine and undernutrition have always been at the heart of social transformations, the risks are now extended to the triple nutritional burden, which has become the #1 public health determinant: undernutrition, micronutrient deficiencies being overweight and obesity. Food systems are now recognized as central to addressing the global health, linking ecosystem health to human health due to the relationship between agricultural activities, environmental concerns, and emerging diseases. I want to finally, in the few seconds allowed to me, to propose 4 specific declared principles for a healthy food lifestyle compatible with a healthy planet. Because plant biomass is the basis of food systems, it should be used as a priority for human food. We need to reduce drastically the current 30% loss and waste of food and resources. We need to recycle the byproducts of production, processing, and consumption back into the system via circular food systems. Animals should be used for just what they are good for. Animals are an important source of protein and nutrients for especially children and women. So in short, not more from less, but enough from less. This is my mantra for a sustainable food lifestyle that will help us keep emissions to hopefully livable levels for people. We need not to worry about the future of planet Earth. We do need to worry about the future of its supposedly most intelligent life form. I thank you for your attention, and I wish you to have a clear feeling of accomplishment in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much once again. I thank you very much for the opportunity to be here sharing with all of you this message on climate change. And there is also a message that was given more than 1,000 years ago in Mexico by Lic Andres Molina Enriquez, advisor and constituent of all those leaders who gave us life in the constitutional framework. In one of their most important sessions, he pointed out the following message: we have forgotten that nature is the product of our work. More than 100 years in Mexico, today we are here in Durango making that discussion about the protection of nature a reality, but above all, for the protection of the right to life of people and ecosystems. Climate violence has signaled and emphasized that we must limit warming to a value of 1.5 degrees Celsius. To achieve this goal, it is important to reduce carbon dioxide emissions by up to 45% by 2030 compared to 2010 emissions, to achieve zero emissions by 2050. The unprecedented transition at the global and individual level can foster a society with enormous benefits for the development of a sustainable economy, like the protection and full exercise of life and the cry of the entire population for climate justice. The earth provides us with the main basis for human sustenance and well-being, including the provision of food, fresh water, and other ecosystem services. The human use of land affects more than 70% of the world's ice-free land area, and it also plays an important role in the climate system. Agriculture, forestry, and other land uses have accounted for around 13% of carbon dioxide emissions, 44% of methane, and 82% of nitrous oxides from human activities worldwide between 2007 and 2016. And if that was not enough, 70% of the world's consumption of fresh water is focused on agriculture, with all this, we have another great challenge, even knowing that we are in a food crisis. Between 8 and 10% of food is wasted in the world. Regarding urban population growth, 25% of the waste generated in the world will have to increase by 210 million tons registered in 2016 to 3.4 billion tons due to population growth and urbanization. High-income countries represent 16% of the world's population, generating a third of the world's waste. And by 2050, the generation of this waste is expected to triple and double in Africa and Sub-Sahara. The inadequate disposition of the consumption of plastics today represents 12% of solid waste in the world. And it is evident that we need a change in the more ethical economic model, moving from a linear economy to a circular economy, to rediscover the cycles and close them. For this reason, today, on behalf of one of my mentors, Dr. Pachori, to whom I thank the opportunity to have listened to me and to have opened the doors to the Autonomous University of Querétaro, I speak to the young people who are here to tell them that we are in turbulent times, in an unshakable society with thousands of voices that incite us to conform, to lose identity, to stop being authentic, and above all, to live in an excessive, unsustainable way. Today, I speak to you to tell you to close your ears and open your hearts, to be strong, and that despite everything, imperatively require your thoughts to change the way of life, to tell we cannot live on top of each other, but side by side. Give the voice to the oppressed and the unheard, and keep in mind that with life, everything, and without life, nothing. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, my name is Xiye Bastida. I am a 17-year-old climate justice activist. I thank you all so much for having me speak today, and I apologize for not being able to be there myself. Hola a todos, yo soy de México y estoy muy agradecida de que me hayan abierto este espacio. I'm going to speak in English because that's the official language of the conference, but I'm grateful that so many people here are Mexican. So I just want to say two things. One is that as youth, we are grateful that we are being included in these type of events, because we are 30% of the present, but we are 100% of the future. But what you can do today, we cannot do when we get to your positions of influence. And that means that we need intergenerational cooperation, and youth are pushing for all sectors to work for the future. The business sector, the political sector, the transportation sector, the energy sector, because we know that things have to change right now in order for us to have the livelihoods that you have. The second thing that I want to point out is that youth are already changing all of their lifestyles. I haven't, for example, I stopped buying new clothes about a year ago. I've been only thrifting and buying secondhand clothes for the last 2 months, which is when I started to buy stuff again. And that is the type of thinking that we need to have. How do we get into a circular economy? How do we make our decisions work for the planet? Because those are the two decisions we have. Either it works or it doesn't. And I also want to say that I was raised in San Pedro Tultepec, which is also part of the Otomi peoples. And the philosophy of indigenous people are that you take care of the earth because the earth takes care of you. And that is a mentality, a philosophy, a mindset that I've carried with me my whole life. Climate activism is something that I have been doing since the day that my parents taught me what it was to have a good relationship with yourself and the earth. And now it has been called climate activism. I don't think we only need to switch our renewable energy and switch to renewables and electrify the grid and switch our habits of eating, of course, all of that is necessary. But we need to switch the way in which we think. Because if we don't switch the way in which we think about our relationship with the world around us, we can't actually have a positive impact. So I'm just here to spread the message of not only youth are already coming together and we are, striking. We got over 7.4 million people to strike on our last global climate strike, and we are going to keep going. But think about it this way too. Every youth who walked out is also has already changed the way in which they live. And when we grow up, we're gonna go into positions of work that require us to be mindful. And that's why I want to thank that these spaces are available to us, because it's not only about striking and doing social media activism, but it's also about adults who already have positions of leadership to let us be part of these positions and let us be part of the boards and decision-making bodies, because youth are stakeholders of the future. And we cannot be tokenized and said, we included youth, so we are thinking about their futures. We need to say, youth have to be included because the future that we are building is for them and for their kids. So I think that what Dr. Silvia Guadalupe said is very important. The fact that we need to think holistically and also reach out and not stay only in our sector. Because that is the problem that we've had. We've been too individualistic, and we need to think holistically and think about how our decisions are affecting other people. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be part of this amazing panel. Thank you.
Similarly, personal points about lifestyle change, because lifestyle is generally something very personal. But before going there, perhaps a reminder for us is that if you think about the current situation at the planet, we are surrounded by a lot of inequity. So while 1 billion people do not have access to electricity and 3 billion people do not have access to clean cooking, the rest of the planet, or most of the rest of the planet, is actually living in energy obesity. And if you think about lifestyle change, it is about how to elevate those who don't have access to basic needs, at the same time then trying to reduce the environmental footprint and the energy consumption of the relatively affluent. And one thing that I am relatively convinced about is that lifestyle change is not necessarily about sacrifice. I think if we want to have pervasive lifestyle change in society, it needs to be based on value change. It needs to be based on new values that we share and new values that basically we adopt a new lifestyle, not because we sacrifice something. And to give you an example, what I mean here is, if you think simply about all the SUVs that you see in big cities driving in the center of towns, which is definitely not the best way to commute. So a very heavy car needs a lot of space, can almost not be parked, but still most of the new car sales are SUVs, also in urban centers. And the reason for that is not because the best mode of mobility. The reason for that is that it comes also with a certain prestige and status to which most people want to belong to. So lifestyle change in this sense would be a value change about how to see mobility as a service, and to value to go very quickly, in a very fast mode from A to B in the most convenient way, rather than to own a big car as a status symbol. So we need to switch to other status symbols than cars, because status symbols will be around. We just need to select other ones and change our priorities. So my emphasis here is about the need to rethink the values and the priorities of values. And once that has happened, I think in order to really introduce value change, we need also the support from politics. So politics needs to create the boundary condition within which behavioral changes can happen. There are two main, I think, boundary conditions that need to be there. One is that free choice needs to be made transparently. So it needs to be transparent to every consumer if you make a choice, whether it is environmentally friendly or not. Nowadays, most of the people actually don't know the footprint of their choices because it's not transparent. There is no labeling of a climate-friendly product compared to a product which is not climate-friendly. And if you don't have, you can have the choice, but if you don't have the information, that's equal to not having the choice. The other big change is, I think, very critical investment into infrastructure and options that we can select as part of behavioral change. If you don't invest into refueling stations for electric vehicles so that they're as convenient as a diesel car, nobody will buy an electric car. Even if the electric car is cheaper, if you cannot use it like the most convenient competitor at the market, which is
Hold
the
the mic
car.
closer, Kevin. Hold it closer.
Okay. Okay, sorry. I hope I didn't speak to myself all the time now. But so what I was trying to say is that the second boundary condition, the political one, is to invest into creating the infrastructure so that we can actually really make choices and select technologies which are more carbon neutral. And then finally, I wanted to make a point about why nowadays lifestyle changes can happen in a very quick and in a very pervasive way. And the reason for that is that we have a massive trend which is changing our society, which is digitalization. Digitalization is a phenomena where basically data is becoming available to the whole society. And to connecting, basically using that data and sharing that information helps us to make our whole life more efficient. I think it's the basis for the shared economy and moving away from ownership, owning each individual appliance, to using the best appliance and sharing those appliances in a very effective way. And we have a big trend here that can help us. It can help us to implement the shared economy and the circular economy, but it can also lead to massive new services if we don't change our lifestyles. I'm thinking here about our grandchildren or your children, or taking a drone when going to the primary school, because all the drones know from each other, right? We are not very far away from that. That might also be a new lifestyle, but this would be a lifestyle which is much more energy intensive even than what we have now. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
As said before, my name is Caroline, and like Xiye, I'm 17 years old. I'd like to start off by saying why I'm here and why the youth's voice matters so much. Our Earth is intergenerational. That means that we're borrowing it from previous generations and we'll pass it down to the generations to come. If we don't protect our Earth, it will be unfair and unjust to the future generations. All movements have an aggrieved group that will specifically benefit from the change. For example, an aggrieved group of the women's rights movement is the women, because they're the ones specifically benefiting from the change. It's hard to find an aggrieved group for climate action, as it seems that everybody will benefit from the change, and everybody needs a clean Earth. But now thanks to Greta Thunberg, she has brought awareness that the aggrieved group on climate action is the youth. The youth are the ones that will specifically benefit, or the youth are the ones that will see the effects from climate change and will benefit if we can stop it. The challenge is that while the youth will be affected, we don't have the real power to make change. Some of us can't vote. We can convince our parents to make their votes count, but we can't personally vote. Instead, we must take other actions. We can have climate strikes and we can speak out. We can educate others, from people older than us to little kids. In the past, the grassroots movements have caused revolutions. Revolutions that have overthrown governments and brought down monarchies. These have brought about change that we ultimately need now. A climate revolution needs to take place where it all starts by switching to a more sustainable lifestyle. A sustainable lifestyle is one where it gives back to the natural resources as much as it takes. This is doable, it just requires change. Awareness spreads through a community. Once one member starts changing their habits, it will permeate out, and soon friends and family will become interested and attempt to change their lifestyles as well. While it is true that political action is the main way of change, every action makes a difference and can influence the rest of your inner circle. For example, I simply started by removing single-use plastics from my everyday lifestyle, and then I moved on to speaking out on climate action at community meetings. Throughout this journey, I've come to realize that the real change needs to come through industry and business. One person can make a difference. Even though the tiny things don't seem to have an overall impact on the greenhouse effect, these are the things that spark a change that can grow and have the true influence, even if it's just cleaner streets and cleaner beaches. While it is easy to be overwhelmed by the facts, I have hope that we can come together and change our future. Thank you.